Thank you. So, hi everybody. My name is Katharina. Thanks for joining me. I'm very excited to share my presentation with you today. It's about the challenges you might experience when starting with cloud operations. With an ops focus, we'll look at some common misunderstandings that can arise when planning a cloud migration, so you hopefully can avoid them beforehand. Then I will talk about my own experience when moving into cloud with one of our customers and show the resulting impacts on our collaboration. And lastly, I'll provide some tips or thoughts how to have more fun operating things in the cloud. Before I continue, a little bit about myself to give you an idea who claims to be able to telling you how to do operation stuff. I'm still Katharina. I'm working as a cloud architect at Telekom MMS and have roughly 15 years experience in operating Linux-based platforms and infrastructure. During the last years, my tasks shifted over more and more to cloud-related topics, operations, automation, and architecture. So most of my time, I support one special customer in all of these things, which is a quite big cloud setup having around 100 microservices. Meanwhile, I feel most comfortable somewhere between dev and ops because I think collaboration between both is mandatory for creating and operating nice and reliable platforms without having a terrible pain just all the time. Please note that this presentation is about my own experiences and observations, which makes it highly subjective. Might be totally okay if you would disagree at some point, at least for me. So I'm always open for some exchange afterwards if you want to discuss some topic afterwards. So what's the point for bringing up this topic in 2023? When first clouds emerged, there were mainly only VMs for quite a long time. So it was a bit like someone else's VMware cluster with some additional services, maybe less reliable. Not very handy. So it took a long time until Docker, Kubernetes, and Terraform came up. But they were absolute game changers then. It marked the beginning of cloud computing like it's known today and enabled us to build all these nice microservice architectures with great options for service orchestration. From this time, cloud got more valuable for a lot more use cases, allowing big companies starting to even consider a move. But from considerable to actually moving to the cloud, there might be some additional years in between, at least here in Germany. As Michael said in yesterday's talk, better living by changing less right after the welcome talk, the future can take a long time. What I'm trying to say is cloud computing with its extended set of capabilities and people out there with a suitable skill set aren't there that long, and it might be totally okay to struggle there. What makes it even more easy to struggle is that many companies still hold on to traditional collaboration models, even though the idea of DevOps might be around even longer than cloud computing. This feels strange more and more for me when operating complex microservice landscapes because debugging a microservice platform is just different from debugging a monolith. Architecture became more complex these days, so in my opinion, it requires a much closer collaboration with other teams and a shared understanding of the platform if you want to succeed there. So I can understand if someone claims that classical system administration might be not needed that much in the cloud anymore. In addition, lots of the bare metal stuff around this might be taken over by the cloud provider now. So what does it mean for us? Is it a good time to quit your job now? Maybe not. And here's why. I assume most of you are familiar with this kind of slide. No worries, I will not explain these services in detail. I just want to clarify different types of cloud service usage and its impact on the operations demand. So this slide basically says that there's an appropriate cloud service for every layer you want your cloud provider to manage for you. You have to take care for a bunch of things when using products from the left side, but you can adjust them very well to your needs. When using services from the right side, you're often limited to the exact intended purpose of these services and have a lot more vendor lock-in. But as a trade-off, of course, they will save you some ops efforts. So it comes that some companies at first plan to go for something like this when considering a cloud migration, which surely takes away some of the things your ops team did before. This kind of service usage could work for startups in some cases, but you might have planned this very carefully because this kind of setup might be hard to master when it comes to details. It won't make much sense for existing companies that may utilize many different services and need more options for customization. In addition, sometimes they have to satisfy regulations for data security, for example, and so are limited to certain services because of that and can't use them all. And even worse, nearly every company has some legacy software that will be doomed to live at an ugly VM in the cloud just for a long time or maybe forever. So in real life, you most probably find yourself using mostly services of these areas. Assumably for many companies, managed Kubernetes will be the most important one and the most things will be built around it. And as an ops person, you're the lucky one that makes all this work smoothly together all day. Shouldn't be that boring, but there are some more things. Those who are already doing ops right now, of course, you know about all of this, but especially for the other listeners in here, I can't leave this one out. So all of this is still there. Surely cloud providers will make you proposals how to solve some of these topics with their products. But in most cases, they will offer only little pieces within the solution that you still have to create by yourself. I try to explain it using backup and restore as an example. You might agree that it's absolutely mandatory to have a reliable backup and restore process that is automated. In a cloud setup with microservices, some of them might have their own persistence layer. If you have a high number of services, there's a demand to orchestrate them very well when doing backup and restore to ensure data consistency while having a short backup and restore time. So the cloud provider will only make sure you can take a snapshot of your VM or of your cloud-managed database, but beyond that, there isn't much that is usable just out of the box. So a lot of engineering is needed here to create and maintain backup and restore automation, for example, especially when it was not considered during the initial architecture of your platform. And this was just an example. I would state a lot of topics on the slide aren't handled that easy if you want a nice, well-integrated and fully automated solution. If you're interested in this, you could check out the principles of platform engineering, which I see as an enhancement of DevOps that might provide you with inspiration, leading you in the right direction when building some cloud infrastructure. The previous slides should have given you an idea why moving to cloud in some cases still hurts, why the ops amount gets hardly underestimated sometimes, and that there will be enough for us to do. You might just do things a little different. Now I want to tell you how we made our way into the cloud while shifting a very classic collaboration to a DevOps-like collaboration. Some words in advance just to give you a basic understanding of our setting. In my team, we mainly operated platforms for our customers. We call it application management. That includes hosting their application infrastructure, but beyond that, we also know how their custom applications work, have to ensure that they are available all the time. So it means we're also responsible for investigation of incidents, performance issues, deployments, and so on. Our customer had no access to production environment. Everything was splitted quite strictly. So we worked in different worlds next to each other. I think there's nothing special about it. It's the way it used to be for many customers or companies for the last years. So one day, I got a ticket from one of our customers. I should adopt a firewall rule to enable communication between an internal application and a public cloud provider. I did as requested, but was curious about that, so I asked the customer what they were planning with the cloud. Customer responded that they are about to develop their application in a new cloud-native way and planning to migrate all of their apps in the near future. Phew, that hit hard. Suddenly, lots of things happened in my head. They planned a cloud migration of the platform that we are taking care for without once mentioning it, and maybe asking us for support for the transition. Were we seen as the old-fashioned ops team that won't be able to build up that new cloud infrastructure? To be honest, the customer's answer ruined my day. Pushing our customer's infrastructure to the cloud and taking care of it would be the coolest thing I could imagine for work this time, because no other customer of us already considered a cloud migration this time already. So we offered support to our customer multiple times for the next weeks, but it wasn't planned to involve us. Some months later, we surprisingly were asked if we could set up, helping set up this way some database cluster in the cloud. It wasn't available as a managed service and was needed very urgently because it blocked our customer's dev team. So we were asked, okay. In fact, we had no clue about how to do it the best way, but we were very motivated and happy to finally get involved. Somehow we managed to bring the desired database cluster to a working state in a quite short time because we at least had proper knowledge about databases from our previous work. So from this point, we got some other tasks to support setting up the new cloud infrastructure. We got familiar with it more and more. But sadly, our support was limited until the customer would have migrated to cloud completely because it was planned to insource operations afterwards. Time was going on, and the customer's trust in our cloud skills grew. So we got involved in the daily business more and more. Short before the final migration, we had lots of tasks in our responsibility. Our customer started to realize that there was a little gap between what they initially imagined how cloud operations will be like and what it actually was. And there was a lot of tricky stuff that nobody was aware of before. We think the amount and value of our work was a bit underestimated until this time, which is no surprise because it was almost invisible to our customer before. Our work became more visible now because we worked together on the same platform and not isolated from each other. Since we were able to prove ourselves, the collaboration began to change, became closer. We could use lots of synergies when collaborating with the dev teams. So we felt a lot more wanted and integrated then. It marked the beginning of great collaboration, which, by the way, continues to this day. So for a long time, it was unclear how this journey will end up for us. Lastly, the moment when we could shut down the last backend server of the old platform was a very happy event instead of being the end of our customer relationship. This last server was, by the way, an absolutely hated and cursed Coruscant cluster that was used for running an Oracle database on a DRBD. So many bad things at one place. It was so good to get rid of it and spending our whole time now for the cloud stuff. I think our flexibility helped us a lot to get and stay involved. Nobody taught us what to do initially. We just jumped into every task that seemed viable for us, having no idea how to solve it initially. And if I think about it, it's like this today because almost every common task is automated meanwhile. As mentioned on the previous slide, the new mode of collaboration that has established between the customer and us was a big part of the challenge. So let's have a quick look at what happened. So when we operated the old platform, as mentioned before, dev and ops was splitted quite strictly. Customers said how the platform should look, what technologies to use, and so on. We just had to ensure that it's all up and running 24/7. communication was only via phone or tickets, and on the customer side, we didn't talk to the dev team directly. Instead, they had other persons in place for communication. In addition, the architecture of the customer's dev environment looked completely different from the prod.env, which led to lots of problems over the whole time the old platform lived, so don't ever do it. All of this made things way more complicated than they had to be. By the way, it's not very motivating when you just can't participate any topics, being just a service provider that hasn't anything to say. So I don't enjoy working like this. That's where our collaboration has been evolved over the past years. To a large extent, this could happen by a change in mindset of our customer to open itself up, grant us access to their tools, and integrate us well into their communication and processes. But a change in mindset had to take place on our end as well. So we fully adopted the customer's platform and tools and changed our internal processes to work in an efficient way together. So of course, this kind of cooperation is not limited to cloud, and it doesn't even matter if you do it within your company or as a service provider like we are. It might be adaptable to many situations. That's because I share it. As you can see, most of the topics happening in collaboration with the customer now, and we're a lot more involved when it comes to decisions regarding technical questions, processes, or technologies that should be used. Some of the base dev topics stayed at the dev team, which absolutely makes sense. At the other hand, some of the base operations topics stayed completely at our side. Next to reliability and deployment topics, preparing and moderating blameless postmortems is a task that is highly valued by our customer. So the other topics are now done in mixed constellations. It took some time until the developers got an idea how wide the area of topics is where we can support them. And meanwhile, they appreciate it a lot. So what can you do with this information? Awareness for CloudOps. Help your management or customer and the teams you are involved with to get an idea what service operations in the cloud will be like. Because shiny sales slides from the big common cloud providers will draw a different picture that might not be the truth for your use case. It could prevent an underestimation of your tasks and hopefully will lead to better decisions. Collaboration. It was certainly a good portion of luck in our case that enabled us to act like this with our customer. Your company or your customers might themselves probably not open up like this. But this talk should have provided you some inspiration and give you arguments to initiate conversations for pushing your collaboration in a good direction. As you may have noticed, I'm a fan of DevOps. I say it because things don't have to continue as they always have been. This might sound like a fortune cookie phrase to you, but I experienced several times that just nobody has asked the right questions and was able to explain the value it brings to daily work. But this is probably the most important part of it because you need the management attention for this to work. Microservices versus complexity. When developing new cloud-native apps, you might aim for a microservice architecture. In many cases, this is an excellent idea. But be aware that this moves complexity from the dev side to the ops side. As mentioned in my earlier backup example, you have to orchestrate all your services for a backup and restore, and for other automations as well. Deployments can be more challenging, and so on. So it's nothing wrong with that, but you need to keep it in mind when making decisions. For example, how small your microservices should actually be. Everything as code. Do it if you can. It's not a cloud-specific thing, but migrating from on-prem might be a good chance to change things and aim for a higher automation level. I assume you, of course, will have your cloud infrastructure as code. But you should also consider it for things like documentation, CDN config, monitoring, and so on. And don't miss out to put a pipeline in front of it for applying the code and make sure no one, or nearly no one, can do these things on prod manually, because only in this case you'll get full benefits from it. It will prevent lots of hassle and give you more reliability and traceability. And the final one, understand cloud principles. It's important to understand that clouds differ not really much. All providers have very similar products. Therefore, the cloud provider doesn't matter that much. You can map your knowledge quite easily to another. But often I'm involved with discussions, what cloud to focus on, which one is the best, if you can work with different providers at the same time, and so on. From the ops side, I would state that it's even more important what happens inside the platform. In most cases, to call it by the name, it will be something like Terraform, Kubernetes, and CI/CD stuff. Would be smart to aim for expert knowledge in these areas and stay flexible instead of asking the cloud question. So that's it. I hope my talk was helpful to you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Katharina, for your impressive story. And now there is some question somebody wants to ask. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Anton. I work in YTB. Thank you for the talk. In my experience, when you have two different teams, one is responsible for operations and the other for development, especially when they are separated by the different legal entities, it's sometimes hard to get rid of throwing the ball from one side to the other in trying to understand who's responsible for not deploying the feature as fast as possible. How do you tackle this issue if it arises?
We work in one big team. We're not separated. So we are in the devs teams dailies. We talk with them every day. But there's a special process for deployment in our case, which is not very DevOps-like, because it should be like this, that we deploy things that the devs set up for deployment. They don't do it themselves, but all the other things happen in collaboration.
Thank you.